So in this video, I want to talk about how to properly prepare your boat for trailering. Okay, let's talk about the truck first. Whatever vehicle you're using to tow your boat just needs to be sufficient to do the job. And by that I mean it needs to be able to have a towing capacity that's going to exceed what you're trying to tow. Okay. Number two is now is a good time to make sure that you have the proper tag or license plate for the trailer showing. I happen to have mine here because it's magnetic. Okay, and then what we do is we have to talk about the trailer. So the idea here is you start with your truck and you work your way back to the back of the boat. That way you have a sequence or a discipline that you do every time, and that ensures that you don't skip something, or if you're flustered by whatever, you're late for something, you don't forget about it. It's an actual system, and anytime you have a systematic thing like that, it just, in my opinion, it just helps. So we're going to start with the truck and work our way backwards. We already talked about the truck. Now we're going to talk about hooking up the trailer. So the first thing we want to do when we hook up a trailer is we want to make sure that the coupler is attached to the ball right here. And this ball has to match the coupler. You don't want too small of a ball and too big of a coupler, otherwise the whole trailer is going to pop off. So in this case, I have a 2-inch coupler with a 2-inch ball. You got to make sure it lines up, and that's what I did here, and that's fine. Once it's on, you push this down and it kind of locks it in place. And then what you do is you use a lock. Now you don't have to use a lock, but I highly recommend that everyone uses a lock. That just helps ensure that the trailer doesn't pop off for some reason. And it's also good for safety purposes. So this is how I set it up. Once that's done, then you want to attach your safety chains. So you can have chains or cables. You want to make sure they're crossed. So you cross them and then you hook them up. And the reason you cross them is so that if this thing pops off for some reason, that these cables catch the trailer. Otherwise, it's going to start digging into the concrete and it's going to become a bigger hassle. After that, you want to make sure that you've plugged the lights into the car or truck and that they're working. So that's obviously important. Then working our way back, we want to make sure that the spare tire, we want to make sure it's got plenty of air in it. We also want to make sure that the lug nuts can easily be taken off and unscrewed if you need to get to them. We want to make sure that whatever jack stand you're using is up and out of the way, so it's ready to be driven and not dragged. Then what we want to do is we want to make sure the boat is snug to the bow stop, like it is right here. So this is totally secure, but we also want to make sure that the safety chain for the bow is also attached. Now, I can't tell you how many times I've seen on the Qualified Captain or other social media where boats fall off trailers before they ever get to the water. 9 out of 10 times, this is your culprit right here, this not being attached. So you want to make sure this is attached. So up till now we're good. Working our way back, I like to get boat lines ready, but if you're going on a long trip you don't have to. One of the things you definitely want to consider is if there's anything in the boat that's going to blow away, if you have any bimini tops or any kind of canvas, you want to make sure that's secure so it doesn't rip or blow or cause problems. So take anything off the boat that you don't want to have in high winds. Then working back, we absolutely have to make sure that our hubs and our wheels are in good shape. Now, what do I mean by that? Number one, the tires have to have the sufficient amount of air, so make sure they're blown up properly. The second thing is make sure, and this is probably the biggest thing, truthfully, is that make sure the hubs, which are these right here, are packed with the sufficient amount of grease. Okay, if you're going to go on a long trip, I would highly recommend you repack these things using a grease gun or have your trailer company do it, honestly, before a long trip. If you've just recently done it, it's not necessary, but if it's been 6 months, you really should. Okay, especially if you trailer all the time, because this is probably the #1 source of problems for most people, is that the hubs there's not enough grease and they burn up and they freeze and then they disintegrate, and then it's a huge problem because then you can't move the trailer if you wanted to, and then you have to get a tow. Working our way backwards, every boat has to be fastened or secure to the trailer using straps. In this particular boat, because it's so small, I can use a strap that just goes over the back and it's secured right to the trailer as it's in its tie-down location. But a lot of other boats and boating manufacturers have tie-downs right in the stern, and they keep the boat nice and secure. That's super important. Again, it's not going to keep the boat from falling off the trailer if you get in an accident, but it is going to keep the boat secure on the trailer if you hit bumps and stuff like that. Then working our way back here to the motor. Usually, well, first of all, you want to make sure the motor is tilted up and out of the way. That way when you're driving, this thing isn't scraping. You'll see this also on social media where people will just scrape these in the bottom because they're not paying attention. So you want to make sure this is tilted up out of the way. But truthfully, you don't just want to tilt it up and not secure it, because then there's so much pressure on the hydraulic cylinder of the tilt and trim motor, which is back in here, that it actually can damage your seals and stuff. So what happens is, with most people, is they either have a bracket that attaches from here to here, so it keeps this thing secure, or in the case of this motor, you raise it up, I'll show you, and this bracket closes or opens, and it allows you just to comfortably secure the motor. So that's basically how it works from start to finish. I'm going to go over one more thing that's super important right now. The last thing I want to talk about, which is probably the most important thing before you do anything else, is just to make sure the boat is properly on the trailer, and that the truck or your vehicle has the hitch at the proper level. A lot of times you'll see cars or trucks towing a boat, and the boat's angled down, or it's angled real high, and all the weight is too far back, or all the weight's too far forward. Well, what you want the boat to be pretty much perfectly parallel with the ground. That way there's not too much stress on the connection point where the hitch is. There's not too much weight in the back trying to lift the bow up and off the trailer. So it's trailer fit. That's super, super important. The other thing is that you want to make sure, obviously, that the trailer that you have is sufficient for the boat. And usually that's the case, because usually manufacturers supply the trailers with the boat. But you want to make sure, obviously, they work well together. So that's it. There's a lot to think about, but it's really not that hard. The biggest piece of advice I can give to you is, when you're trailering your boat, and before you're ready to actually get on the road, have a system, have a process, a checklist, if you will, and go through that same exact checklist in the same exact sequence every time.